Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful. Hello everyone, I decided to record a lecture, a short one. And first of all, you're listening to a Muslim futurist. I am Muslim. I consider that there's a system admin beyond the world room, and this reality is a simulation, a simulated testing zone within a divine surveillance state. And I'm a futurist because I consider every person I have ever seen in this life is employed by their future. Whether it's their future self or the future self of everyone, which is a return of the simulation to the original state. Anyways, tonight I wanted to speak about a view. So the way I go about these lectures is really the way I go about life. And early on I understood that there's many ways to look at something, and that my mind and intelligence gives me access to certain, think of it, sectors or angles to the moment. And today, I don't know how this line of thought occurred for me, but it was as if, when you walk differently in life, you sometimes see different things. Or when you change your environment, or when you find yourself in situations that make you understand how the way you held the meaning of the world can be held differently. Today, it fascinated me, and I want to talk about something that people may think it's a little bit awkward, but it's awkwardness. So, to try to get out this view I have in my mind, I guess. Previously, I had spoken about, and guys, this might be an awkward lecture for you, I don't know, but but in honor of all manifestation that may hear this lecture, there is one ultimate task in life, and that is to go forth. Sometimes, regardless of how we feel, we need to come into the recognition, to the realization that the human mind, in some sense, acts as an eclipse. And this notion of awkwardness is actually something very beautiful. I might be one of the first people to see beauty in awkwardness, but I feel that there is a beauty to it. I will explain. Now, before I begin, just to read for you the definition of awkward. 1, causing difficulty, hard to do or deal with. And if people are like, what's awkwardness? It's an adjective, all right? Deliberately, it says causing difficulty, hard to do or deal with. For example, some awkward questions, and then it says deliberately unreasonable or uncooperative. Like, an example would be you're being damned awkward. I'm reading the dictionary here. This scroll of symbolism, you know. Two, it says causing or feeling embarrassment or inconvenience. You have put me in a very awkward position, for example. And then three, not smooth or graceful, ungainly. Luther's awkward movements impeded his progress. Uncomfortable or abnormal. Now, I have been wondering about human psychology, as I think every human being has from the beginning of their life. I have had many awkward moments, you know, and to some degree, a simple definition, at least my mind provides now, is that awkwardness is as if there's a main server to reality and you're kind of stuck in your own server. The way I look at the human intelligence, the human being, is that in previous lectures I've spoken about that there's an inner realm and outer realm. You're not just living one life, you're living two lives at the same time. In the same way you don't just have one eye, you have two eyes that see the same moment. Similarly, we have an inner life and an outer life. Now, the thing about awkwardness is, to some degree, when an individual acts in accordance to their inner life, but their inner life is not tuned to the outer life. Technically, there is no such thing as awkwardness. It's just, you can think of it this way, that there's a collective acceptance of patterns of normalization, let's say, normalized patterns. So, for example, somebody from one culture goes to another culture, goes to a country with a completely different culture, and they find themselves in a situation where every person in that culture expects them to behave in a certain way, you know, but they behave in accordance to their own culture. So, in some sense, we can say that awkwardness is is the failure for souls in a moment to kind of be able to interpret, or people having different senses of normality. I think this fits into a good definition of it, right? So, on some level, there is no such thing as awkwardness, but let me tell you how I'm saying it. In the same way that somebody can make an argument that there's no such thing as insanity, but of course there is insanity. Insanity can be induced due to biological reasons, due to something being wrong with your brain, or it could be due to conditioning or an inability to manage oneself. But I don't want to get towards that. The reason I'm saying this is that I want the viewers to consider sorry guys, I gotta find a way to put this phone so I'm not just holding it. There we go, perfect. So hopefully I'm audible. So where I'm going with this is, from one perspective, we have this view that we're in one world and everybody's kind of adjusting to that one world, okay? Or think of it this way, that we were in a civilization where everybody had to frown, for example. And if you didn't frown, there was something wrong with you. And in a world where somebody smiles, where everybody's frowning, they're like, look at this poor awkward bastard. What I'm trying to convey here is, even the thing I said about insanity is that there are different angles to how the moment is finding meaning. Right now, I can use myself as an example. The way I look at the world is biased in accordance to what I have personally experienced. But there's so many different human beings on this planet with so many different DNA, you know, and in some sense they have different angles to reality, and based on the unique angle they have, their reality is being given meaning. Now, at the beginning I said that in some sense the human mind is acting as a sort of eclipse of the truth, okay? Now, what is that truth? That truth is the realization that our perspective on reality, or the meaning we see on reality. See, right, when I look at a tree, or when I, let's say, look at anything, like right now I'm looking at my phone, the phone is physically there. But what it means to me is something that is arising from my inner life, not from my outer life. And how something has meaning, which kind of leads to your decision in regards to your own behaviors, one has to notice it is different than, in some sense, the outer realms. So think of it this way. In front of your eyes, you're in a public, physical, existential server. Behind your eyes, you're in a private, subjective server. Okay? That means right now you're listening to me from your own world. You're not listening to me from the actual world, if what I'm saying has meaning. If you just, the sounds you're hearing, yes. Do you know? If you're physically looking at your phone, yes, these are all in the external reality. But the meaning of what you see is in some sense an internal action rather than an external. It's an internal event rather than an external event. Now, this is leading me to say that everybody is in their own private world, but all these private worlds are, let's say, in one public world. Now, some human beings have the capacity to distinguish between their inner realms, their private inner realms, and the public outer realms. Some human beings don't. Ultimately, in the same way, like everybody learns a language and every person in that nation speaks that language, and even before nationalism, everybody was speaking their own dialects, to be honest. Nationalism was what really solidified, kind of made it that in some sense everybody began speaking one language, and therefore the comprehension of human beings increased. Even before that, before actual verbal language, it was a behavioral language. Do you know what that means? That means if you wanted to imagine the earliest human beings, how they were bonding, it's like they were eating from the same bush, you know, like fruits from the same bush. So anyways, everybody is starting from their inner realm, and they are giving meaning to the outer realms in accordance to their inner realm. Now, awkwardness is in some sense the inability of finding a commonality between the inner realms, you know? And my perspective on life has really changed, because for me, God is the system admin. It's the system admin beyond this worldroom. The definition of a simulation to me is that which has been created and that which will end. But God is beyond beginnings and endings. But God is also a pointer to an original awareness that is managing all simulated incidents of, let's say, events of manifestation. Now, in the title, I have said, is awkwardness God's way of protecting souls that are not ready to meet each other? Now, I find this to be true. I find that everything that from the beginning of my life I gave meaning to was just one side of a coin with endless sides. And of course, sometimes it could be that certain moments have specific protocol, and in some sense, when that protocol of expectation, general expectation, is not met, we're like, yo, that's kind of awkward, right? And it could be this view that in some sense, when an individual is not confident in their expression, people can't interpret what they're saying. So what awkwardness really is the inability to comprehend the behavior of the individual. So that means, imagine somebody is like dancing when there's no music being played, right? Okay, and let's say you see this from a distance and you're like, what is this person doing? but then you zoom in and realize they have headphones on. Okay, so before you understood they have headphones on and they're listening to their own music, you were like, how is this person dancing? So the interpretation of awkwardness tends to be how an individual's inner realm cannot process the behavior of another individual based on their inner realm. Now, why is awkwardness necessary? I find that there are human beings that, like, the thing is, we're just like a multiplayer online game. We've all logged into this existential server and we're physically here, okay? But just because a person is physically existing, it does not mean that their internal existence is not different, or their awareness to the moment is not. Their awareness to the moment is different. Okay, so. It's when expectations of our private inner realms do not match the behavior of, let's say, others in the outer realms that's motivated by their inner realms. Now, sometimes I have this approach to life where I look back at my life. I scroll through my memories behind my eyes, and I wonder about the different moments I have existed in. I wonder about the different ability and potential I had in these moments. I think about how they went forth. And I began to understand that, believe it or not, even though we all have this attitude that being looked down upon is a bad thing, and everybody's like, yo man, I want everybody to look up to me. I am starting to more and more go into this perspective that it is to my individualism where there's good actions and in some sense bad actions. But when it comes to the system admin beyond form, all actions are in some sense to itself a coordinated action. So there is in some sense nothing wrong from the system admin's perspective, in the sense that it's all predestined, I'm speaking through a theological lens here. What that means is, to us, there is good and bad individuals, or we can be good and bad, and we can be judged by the original power as simulated entities. But to the system admin, there is no good and bad, in the sense that it communicates to us there is good and bad. But I am saying to that which is unimaginable, the imaginable's specific behaviors is leading to good and bad. So I have kind of practiced my attention to be like, okay man, you look at something and think it's good, think it's bad. You look at something, you think it's smooth, you think it's awkward. But what if in some sense you stepped out of the perspective, in the same way you look at an eagle lands on a branch and has that view, and an eagle flies into the sky and sees the whole forest at the same time. Similarly, we're wondering about the ability of the soul through a manifest embodiment, and think of it this way, that the branch that the eagle is on is equivalent to your soul being on your body, being in your body. Your soul is seated on this branch of manifestation, but to in some sense fly towards a sky that is not bound by form. You see, the brilliance of reality is that the human being finds itself in a conditional situation, but the conditional is surrounded by the unconditional. And so, if the simulation is conditional, the original is unconditional. God is an unconditional being. No conditions of man's mind can, in some sense, fathom or, in some sense, shape that which is, in some sense, the manifester of shape, the creator of shape. In the same way, technology cannot, in some sense, replace the organic. The organic is organic. So to me, what I'm trying to tell the viewers here, whoever you are, young, old, any moment you have gone in your life, any moment you have even experienced awkwardness, yes, from one view, it's your shortcoming or the shortcoming of the situation or whatever, but from another view, it is the divine administration of what inner realms should access each other. You know, I have personally noticed this in this lifetime of mine, in these 12,000, estimated around 12,000 days I've been alive on this planet. In these 12,000 days, there have been individuals who instantly have understood me, and there have been individuals who, in some sense, just this feeling in me was telling me you're in two different rooms, and these rooms cannot, in some sense, you cannot see, in some sense, in the other person's room. In the same way, with how would I say it, with others, you know, there have been people who I have spoken to, and you don't understand conditions and circumstances. There is, how would I say it? I was saying divine management. There is an, think of it this way. I don't want to say, I don't want to conditionalize it, but just to be able to speak about it, all visible conditional manifestation, there is an invisible guiding agency behind it. It suggests that we human beings give value to our moment in accordance to our conditional perception, but our moment does not just have value to us. In the same way somebody starts a fire, let's say at a campsite or something, you know, that the illumination of that fire in some sense is seen by everything in the wildlife, by others, and in some sense it draws people beyond the person's initial intent of why they wanted to start the fire, for example, the campfire, I'm saying. So I want you to consider that your moment does not have just a value to you, and it has a value to others in ways you can never understand because you do not have their eyes. They can communicate to you, but still you cannot see what they see, because if you did, you would be them. What I mean by this is, when I say see, I mean the totality of the individual's awareness. Sorry guys, this was on mute. I made an error. I don't know how long it was on mute, but I'll keep going. I was saying that consider that every person you have met, they have an inner realm that you can't access, and you have an inner realm they can't access. Now, if you were to, in some sense, connect with another individual, it would be the contents of your mind meshing in with the contents of their mind. Now, are the contents of your mind, or let's say, are you ready for the contents of the mind of another individual, or is that individual ready for the contents of your mind? This is something that we cannot, in some sense, justify. Sure, through experiences, a person develops a maturity, or how the brain works is through pattern recognition. So at some point, you do recognize certain patterns of behavior. Do you know what that means? It's like, for example, an adult looks at a child and doesn't suddenly talk about complex politics. Do you know what I mean? Do you know? So there is a sort of consideration of what we can share to certain beings, but we do not know the extent of the awareness of individuals. And that's the fascinating thing, that we are kind of conditioned to treat each other as noun, but we do not know about the events that are motivating our expression behind our eyes in accordance to the awareness every individual has. So what I'm trying to say is that awkwardness, sure, all of history has had their definition I read for you at the beginning in the dictionary, right? People see it as something, in some sense, you look down on. But I am telling you, sometimes it is the genius of the system, how the system is being administered, where one individual's experiential grasp, in some sense, is not ready for another. Do you know? I'll give you an example. Like, imagine there's how would I say it? Let's say there's like a professional soccer player. Okay. Or imagine, let's say there's a historian. Okay, somebody who knows everything about history, all the savageness that's gone on, that has happened in history. And now imagine somebody who doesn't know history, doesn't know that savageness, and perhaps doesn't even need to know that savageness. These two individuals come and talk to each other, and let's say somehow the topic of history comes up, right? And right before the person who has all this knowledge of the savageness of history that wants to share it to the other person, suddenly there's something, I don't know, a person gets offended, some emotional reaction, something comes and prevents that moment. Guys, I am telling you, the way I've noticed this is because the proof is right there in front of you. For a decade, I have spoken. Okay, and people think speech is just speech. No. Speech is the directing of attention. Okay, and I will tell you something very funny, that many moments, even we had an example of it in this lecture, there's been times where I've recorded a lecture. It was everything, part of it was fine. This was, I think, the second lecture or the seventh lecture I've ever gave in my life, when I started in 2014, where the file did not open. Okay, so at some point you're going to understand, yes, there is this sort of administrative force in the background of how incidents and events happen in reality, and the profoundness of there being a system admin means that we do not know the total value of our moment of being. And in some sense, we don't know always the right expression, so you don't understand. Sure, you could show me like a freaking 90-year-old guy with a beard, like Lao Tzu style, and I am telling you, we're all in kindergarten, okay, compared to the vastness of the awareness that is administering this whole system. You as an individual are just administering your inner realm and your one outer realm. Like right now, in human history, we're administering one biological body, okay, and you identify as a sort of, let's say, subjective singular self, okay? But in the future, there may be individuals who can have multiple bodies. Doesn't mean biological. It could be like you're sitting somewhere in your biological body, but there's like, somehow your mind is connected and you're maneuvering like, I don't know, 8 other like android bodies all in the same mind space, okay? So what I am trying to tell you, as someone who has communicated various topics, I might not have a sort of kind of, God really knows what's going to happen with my effort in these talks, but I'm trying to tell you that in all these years of speaking, I have found the ability to notice when something I have said was just for my private, only for my inner realms. It was not for the outer realms, and the outer realms showed it to me. Okay, so I want you to consider that there is a management here, and sometimes if you ever went into a situation and it didn't work out or something, sure, you might have this view like, why? No, you look down on yourself, man, I'm such a failure, loser, why can't I just, do this or something? But you don't understand. It is a sort of protection. It is a protection of the inner realities, of in some sense what sort of path you're walking on in regards to the development of not your character development only, but just the meaning development, which in some sense develops the character. So I'm telling you, this is actually something I can actually link it to Islam, in the sense that in Islam they say anytime something good happens or something bad happens, what is the response? And if you see, the muttaqin, those who are God conscious, and this is not something you can claim, it's something that truly God knows how aware you are of God. But where I'm going with this is, people in the outer realms, they may be in the same classroom of manifestation. It doesn't mean behind their eyes they're in the same classroom of manifestation, or even the contents of their mind needs to be shared. So there is in some sense a sort of security measure. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And the thing I was telling you about the Muslim approach is anytime something good or bad happens, you can go ask this from any Muslim you see, what the advice, the suggestion is that you say Alhamdulillah, all praise due, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, all praise due to the Lord of the worlds. Okay, and why do you say that? Because it's this idea that there is no good and bad. Everything is predestined. Everything is calculated beyond a conditional mind. Beyond there's an unimaginable calculation to, in some sense, the imaginable. And when you understand this, something changes. It's not that your fear goes away. It's not that you become some sort of enlightened being. You just begin to understand that there are moments where, like, every moment, let's say, has a value, but not all these values are meant for everybody. Do you know? So what I'm trying to tell you is, me personally, I went through this cycle of judging my own past. Okay, as you will hear in the previous lectures, I was this super shy kid in this sort of self-induced exile because I didn't trust reality. Because I didn't like myself, I did not trust myself, and because I did not trust myself, I did not trust reality, and therefore the safest approach, at least my young mind, very young mind, had found, was to not engage. Okay, and I'm someone who's, I guess I've lived in various awkward moments, and also, I guess, I have created awkwardness for others, but at the same time, this my own awkwardness or my own shortcomings, as they used to be a source of regret, but now I say Alhamdulillah. That means there are unimaginable calculations, do you know? Because the imaginable calculation, you didn't know what could happen, okay? And in some sense, okay, I'll give you an example. I disliked myself for being shy and self-exiled and not being able to communicate with others. I felt, how are others just being so free and open and expressing themselves? How can I not? What's wrong with me? Why can't I express myself? This judgment lingered. But then I realized, if I hadn't been shy, okay, if I hadn't had this kind of like self-induced loneliness and solitude, okay, I wouldn't have the inspiration to just give these talks. Do you know what I'm saying? So sometimes you may not understand why certain moments happened the way they did, but years later you may. Okay? And that's another way of saying that the awareness was not capable of comprehending the value of that expression of itself at that time. Do you know? But it doesn't mean it did not have value. Okay? And this goes for anything. If somebody says like, yo, why are there, like, for example, I mean, I was kind of during middle school and all that, and I was raised in Iran, and I have a twin brother, so confrontation on a physical level wasn't an issue. Okay, but I came to realize that there is this whole thing of, let's say, the injustice of action, but sometimes those who are unjust, those who do the injustice, okay, it is necessary for them. It is necessary for them to become better people. So the way I treat life now is that, okay, every day that I've woken up and I look at reality, I am making conscious calculations, but the calculations, or the way I'm articulating reality, comprehending reality, is limited to my inner life. Okay, but what if my inner life is wrong? What if my inner life is not comprehending the exact value of the moment now? See, it's the conflict of having this view that there is destiny. Okay, that means there's nothing wrong ultimately, but then individually being like, yo, man, that felt wrong. I did that. That was wrong. That person wronged me. Da 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 da. Right? So I'm trying to say that the human being is this entity that is functioning under, let's say, at least more than one server. Okay? And whoever you are, try to consider this. One of the, sometimes I'm known to be someone who asks good questions, unique questions. One question that I've asked them, I've every time I've asked anybody this question, I've noticed something in them light up, like, yo, this question doesn't get asked often. And it's the question in any situation where I say, what are you seeing that you think I am not seeing right now? What are you seeing about the moment that I am not seeing? And this question is remarkable because it is in some sense saying, hey, if you were smart, you quickly calculated your own opinions. People get caught in their emotions. They get caught in their thoughts. They should be quick calculations. And then you should wonder about what you're not seeing out of the moment, not just enforcing what you are seeing about the moment. Okay, and it's this whole thing that I guess it's in the whole global culture, that they are making the known be way more fascinating than the unknown, but you don't update until you notice the unknown. If you ask me right now, let's say there's two people, let's say two kids on two different, let's say, from two different soccer teams, okay? They're on two different soccer teams, and it's the first time they're playing soccer. Okay, let's say there's two kids playing soccer in this soccer game, like, okay, and one kid fails to score, a goal, and the other kid succeeds in scoring a goal. And keep in mind, it's their first time both of them are doing it. Now, people are going to be, or even that kid who couldn't score the goal, or let's say it was a penalty or something that makes it kind of equal for both of them, right? It's as if the one who failed, okay, has the cost of having the weight of the emotions being in some sense reduced in front of oneself, okay, but the other person in some sense, not only did they not get reduced in front of oneself. Sorry guys, I gotta put my phone on silent. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the kid who failed has a reason to develop the craft, but the kid who succeeded has no reason. To itself, the value is there, but the kid who failed has access to the unknown. They still don't know what their success looks like. They don't know how good they can be in soccer. Okay, but the kid who in some sense, yeah, man, you're pretty good, da 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 da, you won from the beginning, does not comprehend the value. So I'll be honest, you might think those people who fail are failures, but they're actually the ones I feel the system is telling them, come forth, come forth. Let me tell you what it is. It's like God blesses them by giving them a reference point of the bottom of the system. And once they've acknowledged the bottom of the system, the only way is top. But sometimes when God gives an individual an ability to experience the top of the system, see, the same thing happens even with money. Okay, for example, you have, let's say, the child of a billionaire, like imagine, what was that guy's name? Like Barron Trump or something like that. You have a child of a billionaire, okay, and then you have this child born in Africa, a poverty-stricken country, okay. This is just for contrast, guys. And you're gonna notice, in some sense, that one, in some sense, has a great, stronger mental will. You don't understand, like, for me personally, I understand the value of speech. I understand the value of communicating because for some reason, it was denied to me. Many moments went by and I couldn't communicate. Not that I couldn't physically communicate. I couldn't be myself in front of myself to be myself in front of others, I guess. But what I'm trying to say is that sometimes in life, the failure is the invitation to the actual success. Okay? Anyways, this doesn't mean intentionally fail. This means that the duality we perceive in something being good, something being bad. I sometimes think that our shortcomings are actually invitations to our greatness. And those who in some sense don't get access to their shortcomings, they don't know how far the value of their greatness goes, I think ultimately the human experience is realizing it's a self-interpretation. It gets conditioned by the interpretation of others or by the interpretation of others, and ultimately you begin to realize our moments of being have value that cannot be limited to human imagination. So anyways, the point I'm trying to make in this lecture is that awkwardness is sometimes how the divine administers beings whose inner realms are not ready to meet. Physically, they may be ready to meet, but internally, they may not be. And that's very crucial to comprehend. And something, maybe others can speak to this as well, is that as you live through this life, the meaning of it deepens. It is truly an ability to be able to discriminate between the limited ways we give something meaning and to understand the value of the unknown in regards to all the unlimited ways it could be interpreted. So my point is, you do not know yourself. None of us do. Anybody who says they know themselves, they know aspects of themselves. They do not know themselves completely. The mind, every person's inner life, is in some sense eclipsing, for a reason perhaps beyond our understanding, which is necessary, is eclipsing the truth that is originally here. Some days I've had this view, because I am someone who treats this life now as a simulation. It's so obvious that in some sense I kind of felt ashamed that I didn't notice it sooner. So even from what I'm saying here, it's a simulated value. You have only known your simulated value. In some sense, let's say the universe was simulated, the galaxy was simulated, the planet was simulated, each having their own time cycles, Your body was simulated, your identity was simulated. If you pay attention, your body was born. Your mind logged into a persona. Okay, at some point you just notice you are someone. The personality in some sense activated. Okay, but it is also a simulation. Or the content, if you identify as a subject, you're being simulated way more faster. If you identify as an object, you're simulated, let's say, for around 100 years. Okay? But my whole point is, we do not have access to the whole picture. We have access to our own pictures. If we have an ability to see beyond our own picture, beyond our inner room, which in some sense is filtering the outer realms, that beyond our inner realms that is filtering our outer realms, we will first come to realize there are many angles, but we will also understand that every single angle is incomplete. Okay? Now, I'm not suggesting that humanity will become some sort of collective superhuman organism, hive mind situation, but I'm trying to tell you that this world is geniusly designed, beyond measure. It is so ingenious that in some sense, you know what it is? I'll give you an example. God, guys, I don't know if you heard the audio, but I looked outside on my balcony. This car was drifting. It drifted over the curb and went to the other lane. Mind blowing. What the fuck did I just see? Anyways, guys, back to it. This kind of shocked. God really protected that driver, guys. You don't understand. Wow. Anyways, back to the talk. I am trying to convey that the world is much larger than whatever your brain is in some sense, whatever sort of information your brain is processing. Okay, and the example I wanted to give before, the screeching noise came in from that car drifting dangerously. Okay, imagine there's a campfire. Okay, imagine there's a bunch of people in tents. Okay, everybody's in their tent. They can see the glow of the fire. They can see the light of the fire from outside of their tent, but they are limited inside their camp tent. Okay, so what I'm telling you is when you unzip your tent, your camping tent, you don't just directly see the fire, you begin to see all the different rooms that your room of meaning and reality is in. Okay, and at some point you will come to this realization it can be infinite as long as you're individual. So it's like what I'm saying is when it comes to the challenge of how correct is individual or meaning, pretty much once you step out of your inner realms, you begin to see how many different inner realms there are, how many different ways the moment is being given, is activating in meaning. And then you will in some sense understand that as long as you seek just an individual angle, it is incomplete. So this brings you to a moment where you're like, okay, the simulation is inescapable because once I step out of my personal simulation, there is countless simulations outside. Okay? So what do you do in a world with infinite simulations? It's another way of saying imagine a circle with a dot in the middle and there's 360 degrees, but instead of 360 degrees, imagine there were infinite degrees. Okay, so what you do is you try to find the central point. And the central point of all manifestation is that it is in an unmanifest space. That is the clue. That means the central point of this existential system is beyond individualized human meaning. And this is another way of saying, at least I will say this through the theological lens, through the perspective of a Muslim. Why was what Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, started, which Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, finished, the finale? Because they pointed that truth is beyond the world room. Nothing in the simulated reality can equate in the same way. No form, no matter can equate space. Okay, you cannot use matter to, in some sense, define space exactly only through the negation of it. Where like space is not matter. Okay, so similarly, God is not man-made visionary. Not man-made. Man view. It's not human view. Okay, so right now, our human species, even though we consider it, we see externally as the human species, it is actually the game of souls And what I consider the soul, even though as a Muslim, the soul is the secret of God, and it is also the amr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the command of the system admin. But to me, the soul is the original awareness of its creation. At least that's my hypothesis on it. Okay, which is another way of saying it's another way of saying, go back to the idea of the circle, and there's a center of the circle, and there's all these different angles. The atheist is starting from the circumference, going to the point, center dot, okay? And in some sense, how do I say it? The religious individual is considering I am from the center dot, in some sense, going towards the circumference. What I'm saying is that you have this view that you're journeying from the simulation to the original, okay? But you started from the original center of the circle, and you're journeying towards the circumference, okay? But as you go and look at the circumference, you begin to realize it's actually not a circle, it's a cone. And so it all is originating from an original moment of being. All simulated manifestation extends from a singular original point, which is another way of saying all manifestation, hilariously, is awkward when it comes to the original. But in reality, it surpasses duality, which is how you separate yourself as a sort of self in a world. God is beyond it. God is the access point to the original moment of being that all moments of being have simulated from. And that original moment of being is beyond our comprehension. So where I'm going with this is that you as a soul are in the presence, you as a mind are in the presence of the greatest mystery, but you are in the presence of the greatest problem, but as a soul you're in the presence of the original answer, of the greatest answer. In other words, your soul is present in the answer to the answer Your soul is present in the answer is present to the answer. The presence of your, how would I say it? Your soul is in the presence of the original answer to all the simulated problems that your mind has fathomed. Whoever you are, surpass the limits of your own mind. Begin to realize that your inner realms, everything that you're capturing into meaning is eclipsing, is a sort of eclipse. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but it means that you, when they said back in the day, you are your greatest enemy, it's another way of saying you are the simulation that is preventing you from seeing the truth. Or excuse me, I shouldn't say seeing the truth, but these are, I guess, language. In other words, we need a word that surpasses even life. I think the word life is not enough for it. Or maybe I will say it that all simulated problems, all mind simulated problems are in the presence of your original soul. What your soul is the radius. And when they say, again, I was saying that you are your own greatest enemy, because your preferences deny you from seeing the other angles. And when you realize you are the biggest obstacle in your life, perhaps the soul smiles after realizing the obstacle. Life is no longer about, a specific view of meaning. My whole life is not even about, I'll just say this, it's not about death anymore. For me, even, I should say death, I have a different meaning on it. It's all that I am a simulated being, and will I notice the original before I leave? And how have I noticed the original so far? And in some sense, what does it mean, the original? I have said this very often, that theologically, from the view, through the theological lens, the sin Adam and Eve committed was that they listened to a simulated entity, a simulated serpent, and they forgot the original command of their soul. Every being has an original command. And beautifully this can be said, that God has willed you into being. Your value is not just limited to your understanding. And perhaps when man wonders about what he's standing under, perhaps beyond the sight of this life, the true sight stands uninterrupted. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, all praise due to the Lord of the worlds. For all of it returns, all of it, all this manifestation, all your awkwardness, your sorrow, your sadness, your shortcoming, even your victories and whatever, it all returns to the original moment of being. And so what was the value of the simulated, and why was the simulated necessary? So the original, not only the original can be noticed, but the true value of the original return is made aware of. Thank you, and dear listeners, feel free to share your comments, insights, judgments, or how awkward you thought this lecture was. Anyways, thank you for listening. And all praise due to the Lord of the worlds. Ihdina sirata mustaqim. May God guide us all to the direct path.